Okay, great. So we'll start. Welcome, everyone. Good morning and welcome to day two of the Slop Conference. Belong and Sincerity, which are technology companies and platforms for inclusion and for centering human authenticity in an increasingly AI-mediated and created world. We've sort of put together the Slop Conference to bring important discussions related to AI slop, what it is, how it has evolved, how it is playing out in different sectors, and what it is doing to us, and possible paths forward. We are kicking off day two with a very exciting panel called The Admissions Illusion, when every essay is perfect. And this sits at the heart of some very, very important decisions that a society takes. If you look at it at a macro level, the way education selection decisions play out in a society are some of the most important sorting mechanisms that operate. Done well, they bring out the best in people, equip them to lead rich lives, and channel talent where it can contribute the most. And leads to good societal progress. If the right people are in the right institutions, they learn the right things. And done poorly, they also waste a lot of human potential and lead to lots of type 1 and type 2 errors. And entrench inequality. However, education is often a gate-kept rival good. The number of slots at selective universities and selective fellowship positions, the number of scholarships available, they tend to be far fewer than the number of applicants to those positions and those fellowships and those university places. And this scarcity leads to selection processes across the world that combine objective testing, such as the SAT or the JEE, which have also qualitative materials, things like the application essay, evidence of extracurricular engagement, portfolios of work done. Even before AI, we knew that these systems were not perfect. Behavioral economics shows that, first of all, evaluators are noisy, they're inconsistent, they're subject to biases. Standardized testing also has been criticized for encoding socioeconomic advantage. However, the qualitative pieces, the essays, the personal statements, they were meant to be a corrective, a space where applicants could reveal who they are beyond the numbers. But research, including some of the research done by panelists on this panel, have shown that these essays themselves encode certain characteristics of the household more strongly. The signal was already compromised in many respects. But now, as Gen AI has proliferated, as the models are becoming better, the signal is collapsing almost entirely. Anyone, any student, any applicant can create now very polished and structurally sound, emotionally resonant kind of essays or application packets in minutes. And the correlation between the quality of the signal that they would create and their lived experience, their true intention, that correlation is breaking down almost entirely. We've been doing a lot of research on this, and we've got products built for the space. And what we are realizing, speaking to partners, is that almost 80 to 90% of all materials now contain AI generated content. And including evidence of passion, evidence of capability, etc. So this leads to a cascading set of problems. First, on the admissions committee side, there's a lot of discernment fatigue, where folks are sort of unable to tell what is genuine and what is AI generated. Even the AI detection tools are quite unreliable. They generate lots of false positives, and it's leading to this arms race, and that sometimes disproportionately flags non-native English speakers, students from under-resourced backgrounds. And then when all of this stops working, then evaluators, as is quite natural, they lose trust in this written signal, these written materials, and they regress to proxies that they can verify. Essentially, the schools that you've gone to in the past, the network you belong to, and who can vouch for you, right? In-group signals that obviously are maybe have a higher trust score, but in-group signals are, of course, they perpetuate inequality. So that's really what's going on. And given the advances of AI, this might get worse as the AI slop increases even more. Through this panel, what we want to understand is what's happening right now, in the selection process, who's being helped, who's being hurt. Um, are there easy answers that should be avoided, just detect it or just ban it? I mean, superficially easy answers which don't work. What innovations are required in assessment design processes that preserve this ability to distinguish true signal and get to high accuracy and minimize type 1, type 2 errors? And to discuss all of this over the next 70 odd minutes, we've got a fantastic panel, which I'll introduce now. First, we've got Dr. AJ Alvero, who's an assistant research professor at Cornell's Center for Data Science for Enterprise and Society, with affiliations in sociology, information science, and computer science. He's a former high school English teacher and completed his PhD at Stanford's Graduate School of Education with a dissertation titled Language, Culture, and Systems of Evaluation, Computational Analyses of College Admission Essays. His landmark research analyzed approximately 250,000 admission essays across 60,000 applications to the University of California system and found that essay content has a stronger correlation to household income than SAT scores. His most recent work tracks how AI generated essays converge towards the linguistic patterns of privileged male applicants and how lower SES students who adopt AI tools most heavily see the sharpest declines in predicted admission probability. He has a forthcoming book with Cambridge University Press on generative AI and educational equity, which is co authored with Renze Yu. Welcome, AJ. Great to have you here. Then we've got Namita Mehta, who's the president and partner at the Red Pen, one of India's leading education consultancies, with a team of 100 plus members across 15 cities and 12 countries. An Oxford trained biochemist who previously built the University Guidance Counseling Department at BD Somani International School in Mumbai. She spent 14 years in international higher education, guiding 15,000 plus students to universities across the world. And in late 2024, the Red Pen launched Ink, which is the interactive narrative kit, an AI-powered essay assistance tool, which is designed to help students brainstorm and structure their essays without generating text for them, which is an attempt to walk the ethical line between assistance and authorship. Welcome, Namita, to this panel. And
Thank you.
Then we've got Vivek Sharma, who's the founder director of the Gandhi Fellowship Program, a leading fellowship program in India, and which operates under the Kevalia Education Foundation and Piramal Foundation. Vivek is a trained journalist who transitioned to the social sector. He previously served as program director for Pratham in North India. Founded in 2008 with just 11 fellows in Rajasthan, the Gandhi Fellowship has grown into India's largest fellowship programs, one of India's largest fellowship programs, which now operates across 27 states with 2,000 plus alumni. It is a 23-month residential program that includes an army-style boot camp, a 10-day Vipassana silent meditation retreat, and month-long community immersions. Its selection philosophy is built around finding what Vivek calls hunger in the belly rather than polished articulation. Welcome, Vivek. Super great to have you. Now, we'll kick off the discussion. There'll be 6 macro questions over the next 70 minutes. And without any delay, let me kick off with the first question, which I'd like all the panelists to sort of respond to. Let's start with the fundamentals of what is a fair admissions process across all of these universities, fellowship programs, and where are we falling short? This is important to sort of establish a baseline for, because before we even get to AI, let's try and define what is good, what is a good process, and what should we try and protect. In my mind, it constitutes things like a process should minimize type 1 errors and type 2 errors, and should have some process characteristics, right? So it should be equitable, it should be efficient, it should even lead to a positive experience for applicants. Would you agree with this? And where you think are the current systems falling short on this standard, even before we bring AI into the equation? So let's start with you, AJ. What do you think about this, given the work you've done, given your research, and the themes that you're exploring?
Yeah, so kind of thinking specifically about the college admissions essay, it's, in the US context, and I'm sure in like basically every other context, it's this type of genre of writing where the people who know how to do it, who kind of are able to read between the lines, they understand the subtext, it's a very natural kind of performance that they're being called to give, and then they can provide it. And for other students, it's not as obvious. So just to give you one example, when I was a high school teacher, I had a lot of students who came from, or immigrants from other countries, where this idea of like, a personal statement, why do you need to have a personal statement? If you need to know how good of a student I am, just look at my GPA. Which is like, I think like a lot of countries have that kind of stance, right? And like there are a lot of there's like a whole cottage industry of like tips and help, and it's fantastic and it helps open doors. But universities themselves and the evaluators themselves have been able to be quite coy about what they're actually looking for. When does a personal narrative or struggle that a student overcame, when does that become too much, so much so that it's distracting? And I think like, if there's something that I would hope that can change, regardless of AI or not, I would hope that there's just some way that we can have more transparency in this whole process. Because there's just so much like, if kind of attitude structuring all these like really critical moments in people's lives of decision making.
Yeah. So transparency in the process is one of the characteristics of a good process, admissions process, and this whole thing about if you know, in group. Anything else? Maybe one more adjective that you would use to describe a good process?
I mean, like I kind of for me it can be hard because like I hope students understand that if they don't get into their number one dream school, that doesn't mean it's like the end of their life, right? And I think like, I guess this is less about the process and more about the social conditions surrounding the process. But we put so much pressure on young people to, get into like their dream college, get into the super elite, incredibly difficult, college and university to enroll into. And I just worry that, for the students who get rejected, they're kind of like, they might start to overfit their self-assessment based on this one rejection. Life goes on. And, I feel like there aren't a lot of mechanisms or group or just anything that like really intentionally supports students who maybe aren't getting into their dream schools. And then for the students who are like very fortunate and are able to enroll in like, whatever their top university is, I kind of worry about the inverse of that. Maybe maybe it was a little bit more luck than they realize. Maybe they start to evaluate themselves in a way that it's like, I don't know, it's like maybe it's not quite healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess like, it's like just the surrounding discourse and social kind of environment, I think could be a lot better.
Yeah, I really like both of those, both those sides of that coin, right? Rejection and acceptance, and how one interprets that. Namita, what about you? You've helped thousands of students with this process get into universities, and I'm sure you also got students who weren't able to get into the dream universities. What, according to you, from the student's vantage point, is a good process?
I think I'm going to, take on from what AJ said. I completely agree with him. Globally, systems are very different. I mean, in India, you can sit and argue that, getting into an IIT, for example, is close to impossible, but the system is actually transparent. It's like, look, go do this exam called the JEE. If you do well, we will invite you for the JEE Advanced, and the top, whatever, 5,000 are placed. There's a very clear kind of admissions process and outcome at the end. Is it fair? Are the questions hard? Is it equitable? I question all of that, but at least that process is very, very transparent. When we look at the UK, or some of the UK, Canada, Singapore, there's also a lot of transparency in that process, because they do kind of put out there that, hey, if you're looking to come to our university and study a particular program, we're expecting a certain amount of GPA, academic ability, because we want to ensure that you're going to be successful when you come to our university. They especially in the UK, they put something out there called a minimum entry requirement. So they're telling you, like, I mean, for example, the London School of Economics and Political Science will say, you want to study economics at my university, you need to have math at the highest level in your curriculum to even be eligible to apply. And I've spoken to the admissions folk there. They literally have a machine that rejects students who do not fit their minimum. So that, from that perspective, it's very equitable, right? And they're just weeding students to ensure that the right ones are assessed, and then they take the right students in, because that's how they start. In the UK, for example, I studied molecular and cellular biochemistry. Maths wasn't even a requirement at A level. But I felt really bad for the students who didn't study maths, because you kind of hit the road running and you're expected to know calculus, because you're doing areas under the curve. You're supposed to know integration, differentiation. And if you haven't done math in 11th and 12th grade, you're essentially teaching yourself A-level mathematics in 10 weeks when you enter the university. So they're not waiting for you. There's no 101 courses. There's no catching up. You kind of got to go there, hit the road running. So these minimum entry requirements are very good. But when we look at the admissions process in the US, they speak a lot about holistic admissions, and that's a very, very gray area. Like AJ said, if you know, you know, if you're in that privileged bucket to have access to people like the Red Pen or even very competent school counselors who can help you with this process, you probably will be a little bit more successful. But if you don't know, and you don't understand how to write a narrative about yourself, you're not able to kind of communicate a story, and that's what they're looking for, right? You have this common application, then you have activities, you have a ton of other parts of this process, and you have to kind of string the whole thing together in one story. And that's what these admissions folk are looking for. I mean, something really simple. If you look at students in India, their tendencies to talk about everything they're really good at. They look at the Common App essay and they'll be like, hey, an accomplishment. Let me talk about winning some robotics competition, or let me talk about, coming first in school, where that's not what the admissions folk are looking for. They're really looking for a vulnerability to see how you've overcome it, and then kind of you show that growth, and then that's what you're going to do at university as well. Now, that's not obvious. It wasn't obvious to me. I'm British educated. So for me, when I was told to help students write this Common App essay, where they're actually going to say, well, these are the things that didn't go well, I overcame it, and then this is where I am. It's not intuitive. Whereas in the UK, when you're writing a personal statement, it's very much like, let me write, I want to study biochemistry. Let me write about everything I've read about biochemistry, all the research that I've done, what I've done in the summer, and what skills I've developed to kind of let the admissions committee know that I'm going to be a good fit to study biochemistry. Sorry, I'm just kind of going off, but the point is that these systems are, the admissions processes are very linked to what the universities expect of the students. So in that prospect, it's good. There is a lot of gray area in the US, and I completely agree with what AJ said about, social dynamics. And a lot of students are actually spending their 4 years of high school just to kind of navigate this process. So they're doing things for the application process rather than doing things because they're genuinely interested in something. And when that happens and they're not successful, it can be quite a psychological and a challenging time, right? I mean, you've got these very high performing students who've done these projects and passion projects and, done well in these competitions, have close to perfect SAT scores, a close to perfect GPA, and then they've done good essays as well. They're not successful. It can be very, very, damaging. And then you've got parents speaking the same narrative as well all day long. Privileged folk are, there's a lot of support from the parents. I mean, there's so many NGOs that are created, and there's so many books that are launched, and that's not happening by the student only. So there is this social dynamic that you definitely need to talk about. Again, this is for the very few privileged, but this process is very gray. And as AI kind of starts infiltrating this process even more, there's going to be a lot of questions. And sometimes I wonder whether the look at my GPA to know how good I am academically system is actually the most equitable out there.
Yeah, thanks, Namita. I think lots to explore there. Vivek, I'll turn to you now. So Gandhi Fellowship, of course, is a very different program, different from, let's say, university admissions. It requires you to spend almost 2 years in rural India in fairly harsh settings, there are some self-selection mechanisms already in the fellowship, right? So a modest stipend, knowing that you'll be in some far-flung corner of the country. Now, and you've designed a very different kind of an selection process where you're looking for different kinds of things, right? So, in your mind, when you look at admission processes for such kinds of experiences, for such kind of fellowship programs, and which are quite competitive, there are small kind of selection rates. What do you think is a good process? What are the attributes of a good selection process, admission process for a program like yours? Vivek, you're on mute.
Nirat, I think AJ and Namita have sort of, opened the dialogue. So, I mean, pardon me if I go a little, away from your precise question about, what is Gandhi Fellowship doing or what is an appropriate process. But I think the fundamental issue is that any institution, a university or a college, is a cherry picking process. Now, the thing is that these universities were invented back in the 18th century, 19th century, 20th century. Now, what is the nature of congregation they want? I think that fundamentally needs a review, is what I have understood, talking to deans and so on and so forth, because my fellows make it, on to practically every top university across the world, post fellowship, that is. Some of them, not a lot. I mean, that's also a sort of a subset. Now, the question is, I think universities are looking for that unusual person, but the challenge is that it is so window dressed. It is so sort of a articulation of, I mean, the language, as AJ said, it is not her language. It is not the candidate's language, unfortunately. I mean, application process is a performative process. You are sort of, speaking louder than who you are. Now, in this narrative, how do you sort of in this process? I mean, what are you hiding and what are you telling? I think the responsibility, in a sense, lies with the institutions, because it's these institutions which are sort of who have a mandate. But I think the mandate has not been revised in a long time. It is just the fact that, smart people, I mean, top universities end up being congregations of the smartest on the planet. And my thing is that, if you cherry pick the smartest on the planet, we are going to land where we have landed. The smartest is not the best. In fact, I mean, in the context of your essay and your sort of the meta headline, I think perfect is very, very imperfect. And I used to always say that some of these Gandhi fellows, their applications, I mean, their CVs look better than my CV after 30 years of work, because there is a sort of a performative writing induced by, mechanisms and so on and so forth. I mean, today, I think AI is sort of democratized the whole process. So one is, what are the choices that institutions are making? I think that itself is a fundamental question. Because I feel what you referred to as, in my introduction, the hunger in the belly. I think excellence is of multiple types. Excellence is, and, GPA is also just one of the types of excellences. I find amazing young people just watching them on their extracurricular activities. Somebody who's played the violin or done the Bharatanatyam or played tennis to fair levels of excellence is as good as the GPA category. And the second category that I find extremely useful is the disruptive types. The student council types, the politics types, the activist types, those who are, doing something. I mean, my essays are sometimes, people talk about this COVID generation, but really I am these days meeting so many young people who started to distribute food packages during COVID, and they enjoyed it so much that they continued to do some acts that were, communitarian and so on and so forth, and that became their persona in the last 5, 6 years. So, what is the type, therefore? I think the resilient type, I think the ones who are inventive, who are sort of not fitting into the, curricular, exemplary, outcome orientations. And then lastly, as Namita said, the vulnerabilities, the crucibles. What have you encountered in life, as AJ said, and therefore, how have you dealt with it? Of course, I mean, there is the saccharine sweet type of essay writing we encounter all the time. I'm so good, all the things happen to me. But my our approach used to be, and the dean of one of the top deans at Harvard, he used to watch the fellowship in its early years very closely. He used to spend 1 to 2 days with us. And he used to say that all the 5,000 applications that come to Harvard, they are all of the same quality. Now, the issue is, how do you select the 1,000 that you recruit? And that effort is a effort that cannot be mere exams. It cannot be, technology based. It ought to be a passion of people who are running that university. I'm saying admissions committee, admissions is too important a task to be outsourced to the admissions committee. I think it is the collective pool of the academia, the dons and deans of the university who need to be invested. You won't believe it. I still enjoy reading essays and story and applications because it gives me an insight on who these people are. I'll come to the details later as we talk, Nirath.
Yeah. Thanks for sort of talking about how some of these we shouldn't conflate the best and the smart, right? Or perfect, and widening the lens of what you're looking for, and also who should ultimately hold responsibility and what should to take these decisions. So I think definitely we'll double click on all of these. But let's come to what are we seeing right now as an inflection point. So as generative AI has become better and more powerful, it can create very human sounding synthetic kind of artifacts, right? So I want to point our attention to the last 12 to 18 months, maybe the last admission cycle, right? And what are we seeing collectively happen? Are you seeing widespread use by applicants on the one side? And also, is this being discussed amongst the faculty, amongst the recruitment teams, selection committees? I'll start with you, AJ. You have a paper called The Digital Divide in Generative AI, and you've analyzed lots of applications to a selective university from the period 2020 to 2024 and found sharp rises in LLM use. Can you just talk us through some of that and what you found?
Yes, and I'm not sure if people, maybe we can send it to anyone who watches this, but the preprint is available on the archive. So I included a link in our chat, but I can talk through it a little bit. So I think like first and foremost is, this point that was alluded to earlier, like the AI detection tools are not infallible, they're not perfect. So the way we kind of worked with that in this paper was not to binary classify, this is an example, this is the AI usage, this is not AI usage, but rather get a sense of which essays and which sentences in essays were most similar stylistically to the way an AI would write something, if that makes sense. So it's, again, it's not this like binary classification, but it's rather this like degree of similarity. So I wanted to throw that out there first. With that said, the first thing we noticed was just this like massive spike. No matter how you break down the essays, no matter what kind of stylistic feature, no matter what kind of turn of phrase, no matter how you slice and dice the data, every indicator was pointing to an increase in AI writing style appearing in the data set. And also, just to be clear, this is not data that this is not like, a lab setting. This is like actual administrative data. These are the actual documents that students submitted as part of their applications. So something else we did that was really interesting was we wanted to see two splits. And again, there are other things in the paper. Like if you're curious, happy to go into more detail. But we focused a lot on two splits. One was applicants who were lower socioeconomic status versus applicants who were higher socioeconomic status. One. And then two, decisions. So like grant or deny, or accept or deny, excuse me. And one thing we found was that students from lower SES backgrounds were found to use AI, like this AI writing style, more often, more densely than the higher SES applicants. But importantly, they still had a lower probability of acceptance. And that's controlling for test scores, controlling for GPA, controlling for X, Y, and Z. So what that was kind of telling us, and like, there's a grain of salt here. This wasn't causal. This was, just descriptive, right? Just want to like be very clear here. But the story that, was kind of unfolded for us in this analysis was, it seems like not just that students are using AI to create their admissions essays at differing rates, but also that they were evaluated and read in slightly different ways, such that lower SES students using more AI were just less likely to get admitted than higher income students using the same amount of AI. So again, like, it's kind of like, like most of my work is focused on this like production side. And like, I think a lot of the conversation is on the production of these materials, but the way that AI is going to change the reading and evaluation is also really important.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think I interrupted you.
No, I just want to ask a follow-up question. And did you assess, or do you have hypotheses around why did the data have different levels of usage, right? Lower SES versus higher. Could it be that the students from a higher socioeconomic background, they were using it, but they were just getting human intervention to refine it because they knew that they would be judged adversely otherwise? What do you think might be going on?
I have an anecdote for you that I think kind of gets at this. So last year I was on another panel about college admissions, and the director of college admissions for one of the super elite boarding schools in the United States, I think it was like Exeter Academy, if that means anything. So he was telling, this is like the guy who like helps these like really fancy students get into their really fancy colleges and universities. And he was telling me like multiple stories of how students were coming up to him saying, how can I like, remove some of the polish so my writing seems even more human, assuming that, the other applicants are going to be using AI heavily. So it's like, it's very much like, the strategy and how to mitigate, this like AI soundingness is very like top of mind. On the flip side, like I think there's also this question I have is like, maybe it's that for lower SES students who, maybe they go to high schools that don't have directors of college admissions. They don't have like family members who, went through the process, people in their community. They might just think like, well, like maybe the AI knows something that I don't, and they're just like relying on it like very heavily. Like maybe to the point where it's kind of like obvious to the point of detriment.
Yeah, no, thanks for sort of sharing that anecdote. Super, super insightful. And I think linked to the next question I have for Namita. So you've been obviously on the front lines of this, working with students and families. Are you seeing students that come to you with the first draft with GPT, and what are they sort of coming up with? What are parents asking about AI, and how they should be using it, not using it? You've also written that these essays tend to be generic, AI generated kind of essays. They're quite cliched, and they might even kill the competitive edge that applicants have. So what's your view on this, and from your vantage point?
So thanks, Neerath. So basically, look, students are using it. Am I echoing?
You're okay.
Okay, students are using AI. I mean, the tools are there. I think even outside of college admissions, many students are using it to do research. They're using it to do schoolwork and all of that. But, like AJ said, what happens at Exeter are some of the students kind of coming to the dean of college admissions and saying, can you make sure that this essay is not as polished, is what they're kind of relying on us to do. But when it comes to the authentic narrative and story, I don't think AI can give you that. That's your story. I mean, you can put a bunch of stuff in the system and say, come up with a story. It will. But if you really have to dig deeper to come up with something that is very meaningful and that, makes you stand out, or that is in sync with the rest of the narrative in your application. So that happens with a lot of conversations with us, and I guess their school counselors and their parents. And again, we're talking about students that are very privileged. So that happens. But when it comes to just the essay piece of it, certainly they are, kind of putting it through AI. We see the same trends. We see certain trends. We see that it's written in a certain way. And yeah, it's a little bit of a black box at the moment. Universities don't have policies that are out there. They are also waiting. We're seeing that. I mean, it's very interesting. The University of Michigan just came out with this interesting essay. What they said is it's called this Why Michigan essay. So you have this Why College essay that they ask applicants to write. And this year they've actually told students, write a prompt, get this essay written on AI. And what you need to do is analyze how good this essay is or not. That is the college admissions essay. So you've got University of Michigan LSA asking you to do that. But at the graduate level, University of Michigan Law School is saying, please don't use AI when you write your college essay. So there is a lot of conflicting messaging coming out of college admissions. And it's going to happen, right? This is new. Admissions committees are trying to navigate this process the same way we are. So it's there. Students are definitely using it. And I think the weaker writers will lean on it a lot more because, I mean, let's be honest, you put some, jumble thoughts together and, GPT or Claude or whatever you use can generate something quite lovely, right? Generate something to be like, I would have never written it like that. That sounds so much better. Let me just use this and let's move on. So, is it right? I don't know, because you're putting the prompt in, right? You're telling it what to say about you. It's not making up stuff about you. Again, if students make up things, that's a completely different discussion altogether.
Yeah.
But usage is certainly there. And we are navigating how much to use it, how much not to use it, and how to support students through that process. But again, highly selective college admissions plus privilege means you're thinking of every angle. And this whole thing about should I make my essay less polished and all of that just kind of goes back to my point about how this holistic admissions process is just a strategy game, right? At the end of the day, you're thinking about every permutation and combination. How will it be perceived? How will it not be perceived? Will violin be better, or should I do piano, or should I do this outreach project versus this one? How does that tie into this story? What professor should I mention to ensure that I've demonstrated interest? It's all very, very, it's like a game, and you're trying to kind of get to the end. So this is just another layer of that. You're just kind of thinking about how much should I use, how much should I not? So it sounds good enough, puts me on a pedestal, but at the same time, I need to show that I'm very human and that I'm doing this myself.
Yeah.
So
Thanks, thanks for sharing that. Super. And I found the Michigan anecdote super useful. You obviously engage with the admission committees of many of these colleges. Anything else you can share about the dilemmas they find themselves in about AI? Anything informally that you could share would be really useful.
I mean, to be honest, many of them are saying that they're not actually putting these essays through AI tools because, first of all, this is constantly evolving. These tools are evolving, and secondly, I don't think they have the bandwidth, right? Some of these universities get so many applications, and you're not going to necessarily put them all through. Maybe they might put somebody who's on a wait list, or somebody who they're on the fence to kind of put those essays through. But I don't think it's kind of part of the admissions committee right now. There are kind of this, in Canada applications do something called a video essay, or they expect students to write an essay. You have to log into the portal and you have to write the essay live at that point in time. So these are kind of this was happening pre-AI as well. These instant essays, it happens in some of the Indian colleges as well, where they ask you to do that. Some of the British universities have these entrance tests that you need to do as well for highly selective admissions. So there are different ways to assess the student. And I think universities are trying to figure out this essay. But again, what I've heard is this video essay, for example, when you come on and you speak an essay out loud, there are tools to also help you with that. So this morning I was just talking to one of the head of my essay team, and she was just saying, Namita, you can have an essay, you can have this the platform open, and you can have an iPad on the side, and the iPad will hear everything that the video essay is asking you, and they will kind of come up with the answer, and all you have to do is just read it. So as we try to find ways to move away from just the vanilla essay that we're all used to, as we think of new innovative ways to assess students, you're going to get innovative tools to support students even further, if you know what I'm saying. So yeah, I think everyone's just trying to figure out this whole piece.
Thanks, Namta. Vivek, I want to turn to you now. Have you seen in this last cohort of applicants, right, to the Gandhi Fellowship, how are you seeing the use of AI in those application materials?
Was basically, now it's the democratization has happened. The availability is there. Are people savvy about it? I'm not sure. Maybe the international university bazaar is a very different ecosystem from a Gandhi Fellowship, sort of a corner space. Uh, you know, uh, Now Chat GPT driven answers. So if I have two stock questions, why do you think you are a perfect candidate for Gandhi Fellowship? Now, this is a classic, Chat GPT kind of a question. By the way, there are YouTube channels which are sort of telling, students how to crack Gandhi Fellowship. Because for us, that is also a side story. Our alumni only are running some of those YouTube channels. So that's the sort of quasi consultants or intermediaries that have sort of popped up. But when I ask a question around, see, for me, excellence is not just of the head. For me, excellence has three dimensions: head, heart, and hand. What have you done with your hands? What are the sandboxes, projects, stories that you've created with your hands? And then what does your heart hold inside? I mean, I look at all the three dimensions of a young person, and please, a 22-year-old is imperfect, is forming. It's not a formed, I mean, an adult is a formed object. My neuroplasticity is sort of, frozen. It's calcified. But a young person is a very malleable young person. The directions or the waves would take her where she lands. Unfortunately for parents, and my theory is that India will never get a Nobel because parents are deciding on what the child should do. Whereas what we found is that if you find what you are good at, or what you would love to do, and if you pursue that in 10 years, that's the rigor excellence sort of algorithm. 10 years of rigor behind an idea that you love would create excellence. I mean, I'm as passionate about Gandhi Fellowship I mean, I was 30s when I started it. I'm now, late 50s. So how do you sort of, now that correlation parents are unfortunately, parents and this bazaar is not bringing that conversation to the fore. I was chairing a top private school of Delhi, a really old school of Delhi. Now, two kids go to Stanford, Yale, all the 80 kids are going to that SAT market, cheap American colleges. Now, it just didn't make sense. I convened multiple conversations with parents that having studied in the best school with best sports, the biggest sports fields in the city, and your kid is going to a cheap, you're selling your child cheap. Now, unfortunately, that is the reality of young people. Young people in India, young people are not able to make decisions. I want undergrads to come into the Gandhi Fellowship. When I choose undergrads, I find that they do not have the ability to negotiate with parents, that they want to take a disruptive decision with their lives. If they have enrolled in post-masters, they have in the master's program itself is problematic because I did my undergrad and then I went for a master's. Master's is the equivalent of seeking mastery. You didn't explore yourself, you didn't work for a few years, you didn't bumble around before you chose a mastery program. So, but at least the fact that the child has left home, is sort of spending more time on campus, is getting into debating and sort of, dancing and whatever that happens on campuses after classes, that gives that young person a power. And I think it is that power after a master's program, it is only that, nothing else. Because you didn't choose to be a philosopher. You didn't choose philosophy as a subject. You chose political science, philosophy, economics, just wherever you got admission, you sort of ended up there. By the way, the classroom itself is not conducive to the teachings of philosophy. A literature class does not teach you to be a poet. It only tells you the history of literature. You know what Shakespeare did, what Wordsworth wrote, and what was the context, and, blah, 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 blah. So the whole paradigm of higher education is in a slop. And the entire world has figured out how to game it. Whether it was the bazaar mechanism, whether it was the ecosystem around admissions, and whether it was now AI and generative content. I meet my fellows. So last year we had about 15,000 registrations. We had about 6,000 applications, and we met 1,600 people. And we did not conduct an interview. We just watched their behaviors over 3 processes. One was a complete heart process. We started the day with a heart process. The second was totally cognitive, debating style. The third was teamwork. I can figure out 90% of the people by lunchtime. I want her, I don't want her. And where I'm confused, the simple instruction was panel should go have lunch with that candidate and sort of explore that interview. So the point is that even interviews, as Namita said, they are getting gamed. They are sort of, rehearsed role plays, articulate, immaculate, running through a theater, almost a theater-like program. Now, we have introduced a video this year, 1-minute video, that has reduced my applications. And again, when I ask the hard question, that question flummoxes the young person, because that question, what would you love to do? To ask a young person that question, her parent has never asked her that question. Her teachers have never asked that question. The canteen discussions do not, revolve around what would I love to do. Those are more politically animated rather than, around the expressions of the self. Very rare. very rare pedagogic processes exist in the, formal higher education systems where you explore a young person. We try doing that. I mean, you'll be sort of shocked. We used to have a 3-day selection process. Now that was untenable in this, that was possible when we were recruiting up to 100 fellows. Hold one in Calcutta, one in Bangalore, one in Delhi, and one in sort of elsewhere, 4-5 processes. Now we intake 500 fellows every year. So it's a day-long process. The candidates who come for that process, 99% of them will tell you, this was the best day of my life. I had a ball. I enjoyed myself. I built friendships. I don't care whether I'm selected or rejected. So I think what is the talent you want in your institution should be a huge commitment. And Mirat, I mean, I'll not talk about it, but you and I have discussed how that also sort of collapsed in between in the Gandhi Fellowship and its resultant impact on the whole organization almost. So that commitment, I think, is the key to looking at the person to whom you are getting, giving rites of passage.
Great. Thanks, Vivek. Thanks for grounding us in those super concrete examples of how you've sort of tried to create high immersion settings in which you gauge fit and how that ends up being a really good experience for the person being assessed as well. Obviously, you have different assessment processes and there's a funnel, right? So, and different kinds of programs, some very structured programs, some immersive programs like yours, and then some structured programs like universities. And in all of them, all of the programs, there's a funnel where you probably have a very high N at the top of the funnel. And then as you progress down the funnel, the N reduces and you can afford to invest more time and time is cost and so on. So I want to now turn to AJ and Namita and talk about what AI is actually doing at the top of the funnel for in terms of equity and even being able to detect, right? So if you look at it, we know that at least tools that we have right now. So the AI capabilities to generate text, to generate video are improving, and yet AI tools to detect that as being generative is not accurate. It's not fully accurate. It has a fairly high false positive rates, and the burden kind of this affects non-native English speakers, people with low SES backgrounds, like you said, AJ. And on the other hand, and similarly, Namita, you are advising your students to use it as a brainstorming partner and not write the whole thing. So I want to talk about, I want to pose two questions. One is you're seeing that there is still there are tools that can distinguish between AI generated essays as linguistically distinct, regardless of the model that was used or the analytical approach used for detection. And you also said that prompting LLMs with specific demographic details is quite ineffective in aligning output, right? So you can't nudge these models to write better. Do you think this is a point in time kind of a snapshot, or do you think this will cease to be a problem? And if it continues to be a problem, will students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds continue to be harmed? So let's talk about the detection problem first. Where are we right now? Do you think this is just a snapshot view and it'll cease to be a problem? And then I'll turn to Namita for the second half of this question.
Sorry. Yeah, so I can give a couple of perspectives here, like, because it's a question that every university and every evaluator wants to know, like, how can we determine what is authentic, what is human written? We want to identify the students who put in the extra effort. How can we do it? So I think it's actually pretty complicated. So in one paper, we had a data set of just 100% human written text. These are essays that were written before the release of ChatGPT. And then we generated a big data set of AI generated essays, like 100% AI generated, in response to the same essay prompts, and when we included demographic information, like not only like, here's the same essay prompt that the students had to apply or had to write for, but also, write this from the perspective of a first-gen male student from Ithaca, New York, or, different versions of this. So not only was it like, this kind of like the default response from the AI, it was also this like demographic prompted response. So first, we actually found that prompting the AI with the demographic information actually sounded less human than when we didn't include the demographic information, which itself was kind of surprising. So this idea of like, oh, we'll just give it some background information, it'll start to sound like you. Well, compared to students, again, like who are actually like in these, like you fit these demographic profiles, that was not the case. So then we kind of took things one step further and we said like, well, like, if we cluster, we see that the human essays are clustered over here. We see that the AI essays are clustered over there using, computational tools. So we built a classifier, again, just to see like, how well can we predict, a 100% human written piece of text versus a 100% AI piece of text. And, for those parameters, we were actually able to get classification accuracies of like almost 100%. They were almost like perfectly separable. So, we were very confident, like, oh, maybe we've kind of cracked the code or something. So in a totally separate experiment, we had human participants co-write personal statements. So, like basically moving away from this 100% AI to more like, a mix of like, some people use AI a lot, some people used AI a little bit, there's kind of like adding this mixture and using that same classifier that almost got 100% accuracy, they actually dropped to like a little over 50%, which was like, it was basically a coin flip. So I think like, this is like what I'm trying to get at here is like, for students who are just using AI 100% and submitting that as their own writing, like it seems to be, at least for the machines, very easily detected. But the second that there's any kind of like human AI co-writing, this human in the loop, AI in the loop, whatever you want to call it, it immediately gets blurry. And the problem there is like, that's how a lot of AI, is being used. Very rarely are people like just using it 100%, copy pasting, into their college application, into their scholarship application. There is this mixture, and it's just like, it's really difficult to detect.
Yeah, no, thanks, AJ. And Namita, Red Pen invented this thing called Ink, which is your brainstorming kind of tool, which is sort of a collaborative process, human in the loop kind of a process that AJ was describing. So on the one hand, at least with the technology that exists let's say existed in 2025, that would have been not detectable. But I want to pose two questions. One is, this whole question of detection and the penalties that come with it if it does get detected, but also humans don't operate in a vacuum, right? So we are primed by certain things we read, and our preferences, if you look at it purely from a behavioral science perspective, our preferences change based on how we get primed, right? So do you think there's a risk of inauthenticity when you actually brainstorm with AI tools, where you really like what the tool sort of throws up as a theme you could include in your essay, but you would not have ever thought of that, but this seems like a very interesting idea, so you carve your essay around it. So there's two questions I'm asking. One is this whole question of detection risk, etc., and second is the question of inauthenticity, and how do you sort of balance these things when you work with students?
No, so these are great questions. I think the first part, when you talked about detection tools, I think AJ said it really well. It's very rare that a student is going to be like, here are 10 facts about myself. This is the prompt, generate my essay, 650 words. and then, maybe say, I don't like paragraph 2 sentence, change this word, change that, and then that's your essay, and then you submit it. It doesn't usually work like that. There is this whole aspect of human intervention. You might change a couple of paragraphs,